Oh, 16, okay, yeah, yeah. Oh, my goodness. I think I think I go to school with it. So I think what kind of like how is it? Oh, yeah, so yeah, but the more you come on my way, I'm like waiting for them. I'm into it. I'm in this one getting right, but it's a good one. Yeah, I can.
Really?
Huh?
Yeah. I have that.
You, I have the no, because the they come in very, but I'm so, but I'm trying to get involved. This is where it matters. This is where I live.
Right. Yeah.
Because, you know, this is not a public space. We do not want problems. Then your chair, who is stuck in traffic, and you could, he is, he's been on. And he can share all of his first year. I think that is. Our secretary, who used that. But, it's home today. But obviously she's still honored. Oh. Tell me to go to the big garden, the rec. Oh, it's there.
Rita, oh my goodness, what a good. I'm done. Alright. We have a form that.
You do.
Oh, okay. Right.
You don't necessarily have people bouncing down in the work, please feel free to pick it up,
Right.
situate yourself. Yeah,
Most of them are kind of smaller.
why will people back this? Yeah. Yeah, if you want to be
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Johnson, and I am the chair of the Major X Citizen Oversight Committee, and I am calling this regular meeting of the committee to order. We're conducting this meeting in person, and it is being recorded. Let's see, the agenda for this meeting is on the city's website at www.santa-ana.org. And members of the public will have the opportunity to address the Major X Citizen Oversight Committee regarding agenda and also non-agenda items during the public comment section of the meeting. And please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance wherever you are. Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, staff, go ahead and call the roll if you would.
Committee Member Chu,
Here.
Committee Member Ramirez. Committee Member Lewis. Committee Member Lugo. Committee Member Bettis. Here. And Chair Johnson.
I'm present.
We have quorum.
Excellent, thank you. So at this time, we'll take any public comments on both agenda and non-agenda items. Staff, we don't have anyone here in person, it looks like. Do we have anyone online that would wish to speak on anything?
We do not have anybody on Zoom.
All right, excellent, thank you. And okay, our next item is the consent calendar. I'm going to go ahead and pull both the items off here just for administratively. I think it'll be easier. So we have two items to discuss. One, the minutes from our March meeting, and then also introduction and welcome to our new members. So I would make a motion to go ahead and approve the minutes from the March 8th, 2023 meeting. If I could have a second from someone, it would be great.
I second that motion.
Perfect, thanks. And staff, can we call the roll, please?
Committee Member Chu,
Sorry, do I just,
just say aye.
aye.
Committee Member Ramirez. Aye. Committee Member Bettis. Aye. Chair Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, excellent. And so the next item on our pulled consent calendar would be introduction and welcome to our new committee members, Mr. Chu and Mr. Ramirez. So thank you both for joining us. We haven't been in person for quite a while, so this is our first in-person meeting. Yeah, welcome. And if you want to maybe introduce yourself, give us a little bit about what ward you're in, and maybe your interest in this committee, or whatever you choose to is perfect. But
Thank you. I'm excited to be a part of this committee. I believe I'm in Ward 5. That's Councilmember Hernandez's ward. I actually voted for this measure several years ago. So I wanted to be more involved in my community, and I wanted to get an idea of where this money was going, maybe having some input in how we spend those funds. So I'm very committed to Santa Ana, and I want to see the city thrive for all of its citizens.
awesome, excellent.
Alrighty, and my name is Frida. I am a part of Ward 6, which is David's ward, Mr. Penaloza. I mainly joined this committee also for the same reasons. I wanted to improve the quality of life here in Santa Ana, and so when this opportunity was presented to me by one of the council members, I couldn't refuse. I really want to get involved in my community. So I look forward to getting to know you all and getting to know everybody else as well.
Excellent, great. And since you don't know us, we should introduce ourselves to you also. So my name is Tim Johnson, and I'm a CPA. I'm a partner at a CPA firm in Irvine. Mainly deal with tax and all things finance type related. We'll especially practice with professional athletes. I'm in Ward 3, so that's Councilmember Lopez's ward, although I am the mayoral appointment to this particular committee, and been on it since I think inception. So that's me.
My name is Darlene Perez. My good friend Elizabeth works with Ty, and so she asked me if I wanted to be involved in this committee, and I was a little bit confused. I was like, "Tell me what it's about." And as soon as she told me, I was like, "I'm up for it." I really want to be more involved in my community. I love the city of Santa Ana. I was born and raised here. I think that being part of my community and giving back is a very important role for me in my life. So I'm very excited. It's my first in-person meeting. So the first one was very different. I was, trying to catch up, but I hope that I can learn a lot more and also give a good input of mine for the committee.
Awesome. So besides wanting to volunteer to be on this committee, it's I think we can all agree that we all love Santa Ana. So that's great, and it's a good opportunity for all of us to be part of it. And do we want to do quick introductions from your side so that they know who's?
Sure. So I'm Catherine Downs. I'm the Executive Director of Finance for the city, also a CPA, and I've been doing this type of work for a long time, 5 years here at Santa Ana. And I'm very pleased to say that our newest members both reached out and met with me prior to this and got up to speed.
Good evening. So my name is Alex Trinidad. I am the Assistant Finance Director. I'm also a CPA. I've been here with the city 4.5 years now. So I've been working with Kat closely. So on the committee, I've been here almost more than a year now. So.
I'm a senior deputy clerk normal school with the city clerk's office, and I'm just stepping in for Kristen for tonight.
Awesome. Well, thank you for stepping in because your job is an important one too. So for sure. Okay. So and we also have two other members that are not here. So member Lugo, who's in Ward 3, as well as member Lewis in Ward 4. We currently have one vacancy. And I think it's still vacant. I don't remember seeing anything on a.
That's correct. Ward 2 is vacant.
Yeah, so if you know anyone especially in Ward 2, that it might be in your same spot, we should encourage them to reach out to Councilmember Vasquez. Or I think there's a process online to go through, but it's if we can have full seats, it makes a lot of things easier. So, all right, excellent. So our next item on the agenda is moving on to our business calendar. And so we're going to first have a revenue update and then followed by a expenditure update. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, committee members again. So I'm going to give you a brief update on our sales tax revenues update for Measure X, and this is for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. Next slide. There you go. Sorry. All right, so this is a summary of total Measure X revenues received for fiscal year 22-23. For our new committee members, I would like to share that our fiscal year starts on July 1st, and it goes through June 30th. So our most recent prior fiscal year, this started on July 1st, 2022, and this went through June 30th, 2023. The city receives a total of 12 payments throughout the year. So for every quarter, we will receive estimated advance payments for the first 2 months. And then we would receive a true-up payment on the third month. So basically, we would see a total of 4 true-up payments a year. Total receipts for fiscal year 22-23 equaled $86.8 million. This amount is net of CDTFA fees. As you can see on the chart on the right, this first quarter of the fiscal year, month of July and August, represents advance payments and some prior quarter distributions. And the month of September is an actual true-up payment. So you could see a trend of payments throughout the year. Our true-up months are reporting periods September, December, March, and June. Next. Okay, so this is a comparison between our prior year, 21-22, and our most recent fiscal year, which is 22-23. The net increase this year was $846,000, or around 1%. For the past couple of years, after COVID-19, the city has seen a constant increase in sales tax revenues, as shown in the summary table. But the most recent quarter, we are showing that revenues are planning. For fiscal year 22-23, we had budgeted or anticipated a budget of $88.1 million for Measure X sales tax revenues based on our sales tax consultant estimates. Actual revenues came in at $86.8 million. So this is $1.2 million short of what our projected revenues were. So the previous charts that you saw were based on actual receipts received. This chart is summarizing this information based on the reporting period. So you could see from inception that revenues have steadily increased after COVID-19. The increase in sales tax revenues were due to increase in economic activity and because of the waiver decision. This is basically charges this ability to charge sales tax on purchases made from out-of-state sellers, even if the seller doesn't have a presence in the state. So I've included a trend line on this chart. That's the dotted line for the most recent quarter ending fiscal year 22-23. We could see that gap between the trend line and the actual revenues is increasing. Based on this recent information, that we may need to adjust our Measure X revenues for our current fiscal year, 23-24. So these are a couple of next steps for our committee. Which is we are planning on meeting with our sales tax consultant this month, typically end of September. And they go over our sales tax information as well as economic data. So every quarter we meet with the sales tax consultant. So we expect to report revised revenues estimates during the city council meeting in November 2023. Finance department regularly provides quarterly updates to our council on revenues and expenditures. During this time, we typically may adjust our revenue projections as well as additional requests for appropriations as needed. Just a friendly reminder that our next scheduled meeting for Measure X will be December 13th, so later in December. So this is my update on revenues for Measure X, and we're open for any questions you may have.
Excellent. So how we're going to do questions is we'll just start immediately to my right, and we'll go down, and we'll do that for both this one as well as the next one. So Council Member Chu, if you have questions, shoot them on over.
I didn't realize I picked the hot seat.
And we can come back to you also if something else comes up. It's not like you only have one chance at it. So.
I'm just joking, but I randomly chose the seat and I'm like, oh. I apologize since I'm new to this. I'll probably be asking very basic rudimentary questions. So based on what I understand, will our projections for the current fiscal year have to be lowered for revenue based on what's been trending the last couple quarters?
it's looking like that. We'll find out more with our sales tax consultant meeting at the end of September here. But yes, right now it's looking like we will be lowering our revenue estimate for the current fiscal year with our first quarter budget report that goes to City Council in November. And just even though the purview of this committee is really about Measure X money, Measure X is all a part of the general fund. And I'm sure you're curious. We do see that some of our other revenue sources in the general fund are doing better than what we expected. And so at this point in time, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but as of right now, I think it is very likely that we will do some adjusting between revenue sources, perhaps lowering Measure X, but increasing others with an overall net zero impact. That's what it's looking like right now.
Okay, so, sorry, I have a follow-up question. So with those lowered projections for this current fiscal year, will that mean that we need to adjust the budget as well, at least when it comes to Measure X specifically?
If that's all we had was Measure X revenue, then the answer to your question would be yes. But because Measure X revenue is part of the general fund, and if we make adjustments in other revenue sources that leave us with a net zero impact, then we will not have to decrease our expenditures or our spending plan for the current fiscal year.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and that'd be Council Member Ramirez, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I don't have any questions at the time.
All right, and Council Member Perez.
No questions at this moment.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One follow-up from, did I say council member or commit? I'm sorry, committee member. I am very, very sorry, especially to all the council members out there. I'm especially sorry for that. A follow-up question on the kind of the net revenue at zero. So as we've kind of discussed at this committee before, we have a little bit, there's definitely a relationship of sales tax and Measure X, but there is some shifting to where Measure X goes up, like online type sales, and that may decrease some brick and mortar sales. And, Measure X is kind of almost an inverse relationship. Is that the type of net zero we're kind of referring to, or is it more like other non-sales tax type related revenues?
Other non-sales tax related revenues are Bradley Burns sales tax, the 1% that the city has always received. We believe that we will also be adjusting that downward. And the reason we know that we can adjust some of our other revenue estimates is, I'll give you one good example. So our business tax, business license tax, we received the lion's share of it at almost at the tail end of each fiscal year. So while we're preparing the budget, we're going into the budget blind because we don't know what we're going to receive. And especially this last year, sometimes it's more predictable than this, but this last year we had a ballot measure to change the business license tax structure. And so because of that, we weren't sure. We had analyses that indicated that it was going to be revenue neutral for the city, but we didn't really know how the ballot measure was really truly going to impact our actual revenues. We had an idea, but not concrete evidence yet. And when we got the bulk of that business license tax revenue in at the end of the fiscal year, after we had already made our projections for the budget process, we found that it actually came in better than what we expected. And so we know that we will immediately, with the first quarter report, be able to take an adjustment upward for that. That's just one of several examples that I have like that, but there you go.
All right, excellent. That's yeah, I mean, it's obviously you got some winners and some losers on the revenue side, and hopefully it all stays about even or to the positive. You had said that and I don't think, and I'm not sure if I misheard or if it just wasn't in the slide here, but did you say that the actual 22-23 versus 22-23 budget, was that a decrease from actual versus budget?
Yes, the actual revenue, your question was that what we budgeted, that it came in lower than what we anticipated. I think it was something like around 1.2 million lower than what we anticipated for this fiscal year, 22-23.
Okay, so for the fiscal year that just ended, we came in lower than we had anticipated
That
in the
is
budget, is that
correct.
right? Okay. And then our current budget that we're sitting in right now, the fiscal year ending 24 budget, we had budgeted about 2% increase.
We budgeted
1.86,
88.6
1.76.
million.
So about, and that's my math is right, that's about a 2% increase over the actual. So it would be, well, it's still even a little bit higher than the budget last year. And then, so that's really what we're looking at of saying, hey, are we going to be 2% higher? Are we going to be 0? Or are we going to be 1? And that's where the consultant kind of comes in and then use your experience working with the city to come up with the recommendation of council.
That is correct. And as far as the consultant's projections, because we do receive quarterly reports from them, those projections do fluctuate. And so we do make judgment calls as staff as to whether or not we're going to take a fluctuation adjustment to the city council. I don't like adjusting my revenues every single quarter, up, down. So if I have other evidence or other suggestions that maybe my budget might be more accurate, then I will stay on my budget. So we don't have crystal balls here at the city. They didn't issue me one of those, unfortunately. So I do the best that I can, but we do see fluctuations in the consultant's estimates. And so we are very conservative about when we bring forward actual adjustments based on, quarter to quarter fluctuations.
And was the consultant sounding a bell at all in terms of like, backwards looking to where, hey, we're not going to hit this, the 23 projection? Were they sounding the bell and it was just too late into the year to take any of that into account? Or I'm just trying to get historical.
Yes, there was some of that. And we only hire one consultant, but there is another significant consultant in this space who provides information. And we do get some information from them, even though we don't have a contract with them, because they do provide some of their information publicly, or at least in our circles. And so based on what they were saying and based on what we were seeing in the payments, I just wasn't comfortable decreasing the revenue estimate yet, when our sales tax consultant at one point did say that it will be a little bit lower. So because if we look at the last few years of experience through COVID, and I know that we're out of COVID right now, but if you could see what we see on our side of things, the fluctuating estimates, I think you might understand a little bit more about why I'm a little bit hesitant to, oh, now it's gonna be lower, now it's gonna be higher, now it's gonna be lower. We've seen quite a bit of that over the last few years. And then, with the economy, it still seems to be doing pretty well overall, but with interest rates going up and inflation going up, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And sales tax is one of those revenue sources, including Measure X, that is very volatile or very much impacted by fluctuations in the marketplace and the economy. Some of our other revenue sources, like property tax, are a little bit more steady. Because you get those steady increases each year, or maybe no increase, but it's a much more predictable, even keeled revenue source. Sales tax is not like that.
And how much, so we have Measure X and then the general sales tax portion. Can you remind us how, so we'll call it $88 million of Measure X. What is the amount of just regular sales tax? The city's share of Bradley Burns. Actually, I don't think it's only Bradley Burns, but just round ballpark.
It's actually
It's 60 something. We'll look it up right now.
Okay, so Measure X is actually a higher dollar amount than our regular.
That
sales
is
tax.
correct.
Okay. That's you don't need to look up the exact number, but I think that answers. Okay. I didn't need for you to have to pull your laptops up. So, do we have any other questions that may have come up from any of our committee members? No? All right, so should we move on? We don't have to take any action on this. We're just receiving it. And so should we move on to the expenditure? Sure, if you're ready.
Okay. All right, good evening again, committee members. So this will be a brief update on our Measure X expenditures and just general updates. Click on it. All right. So as I mentioned during our revenue update, our fiscal year ends on June 30th. So our finance staff is currently working on closing the previous fiscal year, the one that ended on June 30th, 2023. So this process includes booking different entries to update our financials. This includes reviewing expenditures and revenues. They get posted after June. Depending on when the services or goods are received or provided, staff may accrue these expenditures back to the prior year, which would be 22-23. So any expenditures or revenues that come in from July after that. So our expenditures may increase from the preliminary expenditure report. So every year, finance staff will request for city council approval to carry over of unspent budget to the next fiscal year to allow for completion of projects or purchases. The requested carryover is typically for non-recurring items. So these are one-time expenditures. And Measure X will include some of these carryover amounts that we'll go over briefly. The audit process for this will start in October. We're actually working towards that right now. And typically in December, we'll have an expenditure report for Measure X that will be provided to the committee during the December meeting. Typically during the December meeting, we'll have our auditors that come in and they'll do a presentation for you. And also you have the ability to ask questions to them. Also, typically we'll have our sales tax consultant to provide an update to the committee. Okay, so here's the preliminary expenditure report for fiscal year 22-23. So this is just a high level summary by category. Since we're still working on closing the fiscal year, the actual amount spent is subject to change from what is currently reported on this slide. So for our new committee members, finance develop a specific accounting units that we use to track Measure X expenditures. So accounting units are like a mechanism that we use to track or group expenditures. So these are typically broken by the fund and by the department, and are usually focused on one area such as traffic engineering or capital projects. In addition, we also do an analysis to expenditures. They require analysis to expenditures, which include reviewing the base year before Measure X was approved, and identifying what Measure X is funding from that base year. So what Measure X is funding. When Measure X was approved, the ballot measure called for specific funding to maintain effective 911 response, retain firefighters and police officers, addressing homelessness, fixing streets, maintaining parks and youth senior services, and unrestricted general revenue purposes. So when we provide you with the detailed expenditure report in December, these items would be classified in any of these categories. During our December meeting, that's when you'll receive this report. In addition, the anticipated carryover amounts for Measure X is around 15.3 million. That's the last column that you see on the table. So this is just a change in the timing of cash flow. So as staff requires additional time to complete these items or these projects, some of the expected carryover include for alley improvement, traffic calming, community center improvements, the library improvement. There's also zoning code updates and also a fire station rehab. So this concludes my update on expenditures, and we're available for any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We'll kind of follow our same order here for questions. And so committee member Chu, you have any questions?
Yes. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this graphic correctly. So the expected carryover column, that amount, how is that calculated? Is that the difference between the total planned spending and the total actually spent? Is that how that's calculated?
So typically, what we carry over, we don't carry over things that are recurring expenditures such as maintenance and stuff like that. It's for one-time projects. For example, the library, we're going to renovate the main library here. And so we funded funding for that using Measure X funding this fiscal year. We carry over that budget basically to the next fiscal year because the department typically, for example, for that one's our Public Works Department, didn't really get to the project. It's a long process where they have to review, they have to design the project, they have to issue an RFP to get bids from different contractors. And usually it's a multi-year project where we have to carry over those funds to allow them to complete the project. So it's not necessarily the difference between what we budgeted to what we spent, but it's more for those specific projects that either was a program or capital project, or even purchase of equipment that it's more of a one-time use.
Okay, so just to reiterate, again, I'm sorry, I'm asking very basic questions. Typically, what's carried over is funding for large one-time capital projects, not like maintenance costs.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'll add to it. So it's more of a cash flow issue because we collected revenue this fiscal year, right? We met overall, let's assume we meet our target revenue projections. So we actually received funding. What we carry over is the budget, which allows them to complete the project, but we actually do have that funding that was not spent the prior fiscal year. So it's really funding that they have available that just wasn't used in the budget. It's just more to allow them to complete those projects.
Got it. Okay.
And I'd also like to add too, especially for the new committee members, you might be wondering about that total spending plan at 92.6 million, and that we hadn't even budgeted 92.6 million of Measure X, and what's the relationship between the two. So what we do is we identify spending in our budget that is what I will call Measure X eligible. Measure X is not a restricted funding source. It is part of the general fund. But at the same time, we are trying to be accountable to the public and identifying what it is in our budget, our spending plan, if you will, that satisfies some of the ballot language. So things like, retaining police officers or improving 911 response, that kind of thing. And so what we do is we come up with a spending plan that actually exceeds what we think that we're going to get, just in case we get more. If we don't get more, or in this case, when we received less than what we budgeted, then other general fund sources make up the difference on this spending plan. And so then the difference between the columns there, the $92.6 million spending plan minus the $72.5 million actual spent, you can see that some of it is, quote, I guess we say in vernacular, is being left on the table, meaning that we are not spending the entire budget, which is a good thing because we didn't receive the total amount of revenue.
Right.
So if you look at our total actual spent of 72.5 million plus the expected carryover of 15.3, that's 87.8 million. And that actually exceeds what we are, what we've received. So again, that will be made up by other general fund revenue sources. And that's the tricky part with this that you'll probably get used to with time. I know that our chair is very used to this concept. The tricky thing is that we are focusing on an individual revenue and individual spending for Measure X, but it's still all part of general fund. It's not a restricted revenue source.
Mm.
So by my accounting standards for governmental accounting, I'm not allowed to report it in a separate fund as though it were restricted. If I did that, then somebody might be able to say that we did not pass a general tax, that we passed a special tax, which may have required a different voting threshold.
Okay.
So it's tricky in that we try to be accountable for this general revenue source and this spending. But the bottom line, the truth of it is that it's all part of the general fund. So if we come up short on Measure X, maybe it's business license tax
Okay.
that's going to be covering the additional spending.
I appreciate that very detailed explanation because I think I'm starting to get it. Slowly but surely. So just want to reinforce this so I understand. The total spending column, that 92.6 million, really that's just an indication of spending items that have been identified as sort of satisfying these categories of spending directives, language that was in the actual ballot measure.
Yes,
So
sir.
that's all that represents.
That's exactly correct.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. Thank you.
Good questions for sure. Committee member Ramirez.
So I did have initial questions, but that kind of threw me off a little bit. So I guess essentially we won't be able to see what the Measure X budget is going to be until December, correct? Like we're not going to be able to see a detailed report until December.
So we do have, if you look at the prior meetings, quarterly meetings that we do have expenditures, and you could get an idea of what we have in these high level categories. Typically around this meeting is, the thing is amounts may change. They may fluctuate, for example, because we're still booking entries. So we typically give you a high level summary during this meeting, but in December, you would get the final audited version of it. But if you go to, I forget which the last meeting that we had, March, I believe, you could see what we've provided an expenditure report in those meetings. It will not change much from that one.
And just to give you an idea, so our auditors will be on site first week of October, and they will probably wrap up field work by the end of October, which means that we'll be going back and forth between, you know, final adjusting entries and wrapping up things during November. So it is very likely that we will have a detailed schedule done by the end of November because we'll know what our final numbers are. But we typically issue our audited financial statements first or second week, certainly by mid-December. And so that's why we would have it for your December 13th meeting. But in the office, in all reality, we will probably know those detailed numbers by the end of November, by Thanksgiving anyway.
All right, great. And by the way, that's really early for municipalities. So good job on that. Like always, that's a great scorecard type item that your group should be all proud of.
We have an amazing accounting manager. Maybe someday you'll meet her. She's awesome.
Perfect. And committee member Perez.
So thank you for the detailed explanation as to why one-time expenses get rolled over. Are you able to clarify why recurring charges are not rolled over onto the next fiscal year?
Yeah. So technically you could, if the council approved it. But it's just not a very good practice, because if you think in terms very simply that, let's say that every year we had a budget of 100, but we didn't spend our entire budget. And let's say that that budget of 100 was for buying pencils. Next year, we have another budget of 100 to buy pencils. If we only bought 90 of pencils this year, and then next year now we have 110 to buy pencils, then we still only bought 90, and then the next year we have 120 to buy pencils. You can see how a few years down the road this might create a problem for us. And we like to be, this is part of being accountable to the public, is when we don't spend all of our recurring money, it just goes right back into the general fund balance, or I should say it stays in the general fund balance technically. And so that creates an opportunity for the city council to have additional money to fund additional items. We would refer to that extra as one time. So in this simple example, if we only spent 90 on pencils and we have 10 left over, I can report to the council, we only spent 90, we have 10 left over. I understand that you might be interested in buying that piece of property for a new park. Well, we have 10 available to do that. And so it provides opportunities for the council to take on some initiatives that maybe they might not have been able to afford elsewise.
Thank you.
Perfect. Like always, I have a question or two. Yes, thank you for the actual versus planned, and I think we're all probably somewhat numbers people, so we see a $20 million differential between the planned and actual, and a carryover of only 15, and we're going, wait a minute. So appreciate that explanation. In terms of the carryover, so those are all essentially specifically identified, maybe not specific, we'll call it identified projects. So for example, you mentioned alleys. So those are kind of specific projects that are in place, and they were identified last year. They just weren't able to get in place this coming year, and departments are aware of that, and they're in the progress of spending the money and fixing the streets or the alleys or the library or the fire station.
That is absolutely correct. And to add to that, in the example of the alleys, so let's say that our public works director has an allocation of $1.5 million each year for alleys. It might not be a good, how shall I say, to go out to bid and
Right.
say, contractors, I have $1.5 million for alleys. He might purposely, by design, wait a couple of years and accumulate until he has 3 million to go out to bid for alleys, because he might pick up some economies of scale with that. So sometimes it's not just a matter of, oh, we didn't get around to the work. It's actually by design, because it just makes sense.
So budgetarily, do you have to identify that to be able to carry it forward on those specifics?
Yeah. And that staff report is going to city council on Tuesday night.
Yeah, so I saw that one, and that's where a little bit of my question is coming from, because that looked like it was there wasn't it's not yet the overall carryover, because you don't have that number yet, right, in terms of the audited statement with the excess general fund.
It's a maximum amount that we're requesting. So based on what we know today, we say that we may have X amount to carry over. Once we close our books, if we have less than that to carry over, then we're only going to carry over what is actually available. So council, we are asking you to authorize us to carry up to the requested amount, which will be a maximum, subject to change based on actual available, but we will not exceed that maximum that we report out to council and get authorization for.
Does the reporting to council ever maybe it doesn't, just not aware of it, I just haven't seen it, to where it identifies, hey, here, we got 4.4 million of fixing streets. Here are the projects, or at least maybe the neighborhoods that money is going to be spent in. Does it get down to that granular of a level? So that way, if a neighbor is like, gosh, my street hasn't been worked on in 20 years, to where we can point to and say, well, it's on, it's including this $4.4 million of carryover. So it's going to be coming up in the next year or two.
I can't think of how it's reported specifically to the council, but I do believe that the information is out on our website. So if you dig deep in the public works section of our website, they will actually show and list, there'll typically be maps and say, this is the such and such program, and they'll have little blue or red lines on the streets that are to be done. So the information is available. It's just that I don't think it's readily available. I think you'd have to dig deep or request it. And I can't think of when it's been reported out to the council in the way that you're talking about, like this next year, we're going to be doing First Street from here to here, unless it's a larger arterial project. Then they're specifically called out in individual staff reports. But for like your alley program, where it could be alleys here, and here, totaling 1.5 million, I can't think of a place where it's reported out.
The carryover report that you'll see, I think you saw it on the website. It's on Tuesday. Depending on how they label the projects, it is specific. Sometimes they'll include the street names, like the 2 intersecting streets.
Yeah, that's for the arterials.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those are like the larger. So, I mean, and probably I should have used a different, I mean, because streets, I think they're, it is easy. Well, maybe not easy, but it's identifiable because we're always naming our streets, right? But like in terms of like even the $4 million youth services, I think that's probably library, assuming that's, so, I mean, is there any report out that we ever say, hey, we got this carryover 4 million for library services or, rehabbing the library? Does that?
Yeah, that report that goes to council on Tuesday night, it actually does have a line item for library, and I think it's 3 point something of that.
For the library, it's 3.9 million. That's for, and then I think there's one more small project that the library is carrying over, but most of it is the library.
So you will find them individually, but it would be difficult for you to make the correlation between what you see here and what we have on that report that goes to council Tuesday night, because that report covers everything. And so even the general fund section, it's on the entire general fund. So it's not like, okay, here's the portion of the general fund that's Measure X, so that you could make a one-to-one connection with what we present here. We can provide that to you because we have it, but you will see the individual projects. Like we said, the library is listed in that carryover report.
And one of the other items that you indicated was the fire station rehab. Is that the Cypress Street fire station?
No, that's funding for multiple fire stations. So that's something that we funded, I believe it was this year, but we're carrying over because that requires time from Public Works, but I don't think it's specifically the Cypress fire station.
No, we own all of the fire stations in the city because we used to have a fire department. And so the county fire operates out of our buildings, our owned buildings, which are the fire stations. And so we are responsible for rehabbing and maintaining them. And so we have a whole series of small projects like a fence here, a new roof there, remodeled bathrooms in that one. And that's what is on the carryover list.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm going to be in, I'm not even sure how to ask a question. So I'm just going to start talking and hopefully you understand what I'm saying. So we have the 92.6 versus 72, 15 of it's allocated. So that's 5 left roughly, right? Is there any, my concern is the forward looking, like, when we go from 1.5 to 1%, and recommendation of this group has been to, hey, start planning ahead for that. I mean, is there opportunity to be able to say, hey, we have this extra 5, which, again, I know that this is just a snippet of an overall, bigger budget, but I mean, is there opportunity to be able to utilize, start that type of a project or a reserve type thing, a sunset, Measure X sunset reserve, utilizing, kind of some of the numbers that we saw on the screen right now, and is it in that $5 million ballpark, or is that utilized somewhere else?
So there's a couple answers to your question. The first is theoretically, yes, you have it correct. That the 5 million could be potentially available for some kind of, Measure X sinking fund or sunset fund or something like that. We have not received direction from the city council to do that. So from our standpoint, it's just simply going to get added to the general fund balance. And then the other point is that there may not be exactly 5 million because you're looking at a spending plan, but some of that money, which would have been funded by other general fund revenue sources, since we know that we did not receive 92.6 million in Measure X money, some of that money may have actually been spent on other things, as funded by, whether it be business license tax or something else. And so it may not be a clean 5 million, but your theoretical question is absolutely correct.
And would we be able to actually have we have like the pension sunset, and that's an actual separate reserve, I believe.
Yes.
Would we be able to do that, Measure X sunset type reserve account in a separate item, or because it's general fund, it would essentially just kind of be okay.
Yeah, because it's general fund money, it would be just part of the general fund balance.
Mhm.
The reason that we're able to segregate the pension amount is because we are actually shifting that money into what we call a section IRC, Internal Revenue Code, section 115 trust. It's an irrevocable trust. So once we deposit the money into that account, we cannot use it for anything other than pension. And we're very clear with the council with that each June when we ask their permission to make that deposit into that account. So it is a little bit different.
Perfect. Thank you. Do we have any follow-up questions from anyone? It doesn't, go ahead.
No, I'm just digesting.
Yes.
The information, not the food.
It's okay to do both. So, okay, well, I think that is all the questions from our group.
Actually, I'm sorry,
And-
I do have a.
Yes,
follow-up.
go for it.
I don't know if maybe this was a question I should have asked during the revenue update. But so, for example, when I'm looking at this graphic here, expected carryover, I'll just pick that column. Now, are these funds that are being carried over, are they from Measure X? The reason I ask is because I'm learning that Measure X is not a restricted revenue source. It's all part of the general fund. So these numbers, do they represent, funds raised by Measure X? Okay.
Because we actually spent 72.5 million and we received 86 point something. So that means that we had roughly 14 million to carry over of actual Measure X money. We're
Wow.
carrying over of the identified spending plan, 15 million. And so that means in all reality, 1 million of it is being funded by something else.
Other than Measure X.
Mhm.
Got it.
Yep.
But 14 million of that is from Measure X.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And believe me, you're going to ask the same questions for probably about a year. So, and I continue to ask some of the same questions. So
I appreciate all the detailed responses because it's a lot of new information for me. So and I'm sure I can't speak for the other new or newish committee members, but it's a lot. But thank you though. Like I said, I think I'm getting it.
yeah, I feel like I maybe am starting to get it too. But so, and it's been a couple of years. So it's which is why, kudos to our, to your group, because this is a lot to get grasp on this stuff. So, and yet alone try to explain it. So, okay, well, I think that is the end of our business calendar, unless I'm missing something. And which I don't think I am. I'm not seeing any heads nodding for me.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go for it. Absolutely.
Sorry. General question. So in December, we'll get an expenditure report, a detailed one. Then this committee, do we look at that report and then look at how to budget things going forward based on that? Or how does that work? I don't know.
Chair, if it's your pleasure, I can segue straight into staff member comments because I have a few things to touch on and I can wrap that in as part of my comments.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And then we'll, after you do that, I'll just let him, committee member Chu, ask any follow-up questions you might have, which I know you've always been open to
Oh, yeah.
to any type of question. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yes, why don't you go ahead and segue into that, and then if you have any follow-ups, we'll
Okay.
continue with that. Yeah.
Sounds good. So basically your overall annual cycle, here's what it looks like. Your December 13th meeting, which is your next one, you are going to receive 2 reports from besides your normal revenue and expenditure update. You are going to receive a report from our independent auditor, a CPA firm that audits our financial statements and renders an opinion on them. They're independent, third party. And they also do, I'll use air quotes, audit report for our Measure X expenditures. So you will receive a presentation and be able to ask questions directly to our independent auditors in December. The second report that you'll receive in December is from our sales tax consultant. So those people that we meet with quarterly, you get to meet with them annually and ask them detailed questions and pick their brains about how they come up with their predictions, et cetera, and ask detailed questions about how things work and what things are doing better or worse in the city of Santa Ana, et cetera, et cetera. So that's your December meeting, a very important meeting. Then your March meeting is even more important because that's where you take all of the information that you've been receiving all year long and digesting, and you will start formulating your recommendations to City Council for the upcoming budget cycle. So that's where you might come up with I'm just going to riff here, and you might come up with a recommendation that says, we noticed that we're spending an awful lot of Measure X money on this thing. We recommend that maybe you shift that over to this other thing because we think that would be a better use of Measure X money and be more consistent with the ballot language or something like that. One of the recommendations that's come out of this committee the last couple of years is something that Chair Johnson alluded to earlier, which is kind of setting aside some money to prepare for that reduction in the Measure X rate that happens in 2029. But the council has received those recommendations and has not acted on them. But that could be another recommendation. So again, your December meeting, you're going to receive some very important annual reports. Your March meeting, you're going to formulate your recommendations for the City Council for the budget process. And then your June and September meetings are more of this update nature, where we're going to clue you in on what's going on. You get to ask your question. You get to ask your questions during all meetings, but these are more of your update meetings, if you will. If you feel a need to have an additional meeting, that is certainly, you can do that. We work with the chair on that. And if there's something going on that the chair says, I think we could use an additional meeting for this reason, we will accommodate in every way that we can. You as a committee also have the ability to invite other departments to make presentations. This committee has done that before. So when this committee got started, they were very, very interested in some of the police department expenditures and the Measure X spending plan. And so they invited the police department to come and make some presentations and hear a little bit more about what those expenditures look like of Measure X money for the police budget. So you do have the ability to do that as well. Again, those requests get funneled through our chair and we accommodate the best that we can. I think we've accommodated pretty much all the requests. I do have some more comments, but I'll pause there to see if there is any additional questions.
I think that answered my question. So thank you.
I do have a question. So if we do want to go about inviting another group to the meeting, how do we go about that?
You would make that request through your chair, and then your chair will talk to staff and and we'll make it happen, because honestly, we're here to accommodate you. We're not gonna, well, is there a quorum? Let's take a vote on it. We want you to have as much information as what you feel you need. And we want to be very transparent and open with you. So if you make a request, we will accommodate.
Do I make that request during a meeting? or-
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, you can do it right now if you want.
That's right.
Do I do that?
Go for it if you want.
Well, I was looking at that budget that you said for March of, I think it was earlier March this year. Oops. And I'm a little bit concerned with the quality of life team. So I was wondering if I could make a request to Jim that we get the quality of life team in here to give us a report on, what they're spending their funds on and, how we're helping them, what they're doing.
Perfect, great. And I think I'll maybe follow up. Do you have any more comments, Director Downs?
I do have a couple more staff comments.
Go for it.
Okay, first, I just wanted to thank you for coming back in person here to the meeting and being patient with us, since this is our first time back in something close to 4 years. We, had a little technology to iron out, so thank you for your patience with that. I think it was a good first run meeting for back in person, so I'm really happy about that. The city council, I know that I've informed you all of this, but the city council during our budget process did direct us to add the Measure X committee to the list of committees that are receiving stipends for each meeting. That has to go back to city council for actual action. So just be assured we are on top of that. And once it does go back to action, we will get you guys all set up for those stipends. So I just wanted to let you know that we have not forgotten about that. And that was the end
Thank
of my
you.
staff comments.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, personally, I wasn't expecting a stipend at all. I'm just doing this because I love the city, but thank you for being on top of that. I'm not going to say no to stipends, but thanks.
You have anything?
No comments from me, but it's actually great being in person because this is the first time I've been in person since I started the committee. It's been through Zoom, so it's actually a little bit different. But thank you, and thank you for Norma for helping us with this since Kristen was out today.
Yes, absolutely. Normally, I would go in the same order, but since we brought up the quality of life team, and I'm going to expand a little bit on what we kind of did at the very beginning of this. We kind of broke it out. We're doing 4 meetings a year, and we broke it out to where we don't want to have 4-hour meetings, and so. Well, if we need to, we'll do it, but that's probably not everyone's goal. But we kind of spread it out to where, okay, PD would come in and do one meeting, and then Parks and Recreation did another planning. Is it planning and I forget what the name.
Yeah, there's code enforcement that's a part of planning and building.
Yeah, so planning and building specifically, I think more on the code enforcement side. We did another one. I forget if I think the quality of life team is actually under is that under community CDA?
Yeah, it is. It's actually multi-department, but yeah.
Yeah, because the collaboration between
Mhm.
CDA and those also PD. And so we can definitely, kind of, if we want to recycle through and not recycle meaning we've already done this because it's been 4 years or whatever, but if we wanted to make that request to see if we can line some of that up, I think that would be fine to do. Or if we want to if there's desire just to focus in on one of those areas, obviously the quality of life team is one that was brought up initially. So I mean, I'm open to whatever our group wants to hear, especially because knowing that I've heard it, but things have changed. So maybe things have changed. Like our initial kind of thing was, hey, how is this going to help you? Because it was brand new money coming in at that point, right? And so, how is this going to help you? What do what should our expectations be of improvements and those types of things? So, I mean, I'm open to maybe if we just want to have a discussion on it. Obviously, there's items that we can't. And until we agendize things, we can't vote or anything like that. But so it'd just be kind of taking consideration for, potential future meetings and stuff like that. So open mic, go ahead.
I think I have questions about money being spent on retaining police officers. So is that something that I could request, like, I don't know, a presentation from the police department about
Perfect.
money that's being spent to retain police officers?
Excellent.
I agree with Michael. I think the police department and how they use those funds with retaining police officers. I think that's something that I would agree with.
Perfect. Was there anything else besides the cult team?
Yes, I see here for youth services for the crossing guard. Who would we call in for that? Like Public Works?
Public Works.
Yeah, Public Works. The Public Works would work for me too.
Okay, perfect. So we'll kind of maybe try to get some things scheduled. It's not going to be we're not going to have all of them come in at one time. But over time we can kind of get a good feeling for it over time. So
It sounds like, because we had a couple on the police officers, maybe what we can do, this would be my proposal for the December meeting, since you're already getting to fairly large presentations. So that's already going to be naturally a little bit longer of a meeting. Maybe we go ahead and see if we can't get you a presentation from the cult team. And then we can give you more detailed information about exactly what we're spending the money on for retaining police. And then based on that information that we provide you, you may want to go ahead and request the police department to come and make a presentation at your March meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
I like that idea.
yeah, I think that sounds great. Perfect
Okay.
suggestion.
All
Yeah,
right,
I
very
think
good.
it's better to be armed with that information prior to going into.
Yeah,
to
and that way, at least we're only bringing in one other department for presentation in your December meeting, and then we can go from there. So we'll provide you some additional information and see where you want to
Yeah.
see.
And I would say on the stats on the PD, from thinking back when they were here last time, I know the important type things will be, kind of the pluses and minuses and budget versus budgeted. So how many hires came on board, how many folks retire? I mean, it's a big department, so you have both going on all the time, right? So the hires, the retires, and then how many have already been budgeted for, and where's kind of our deltas between all that type of stuff, as well as if there's, and I think that the chief does report on this now, but the response times on the various I forget what they call them, but code 1, code 2 type, those items.
Categorical data, yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that'll help us determine if we want to, have them do a more expanded in March. Okay, so now, so staff has done your comments. Are we good on that side? Okay, so now what we would do is we'll do on this side. If there's anything further than, and we'll just go in the same order. So committee member Chu.
Thanks for your patience in answering our questions. I enjoyed this meeting and I think it was pretty productive, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure I will continue to learn as I continue to serve on this committee. So thank you.
Perfect.
I also want to thank you guys for your patience. I know that this is a lot of information to feed us. So thank you a lot for taking your time to explain everything. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you guys more and getting to know you guys better.
Same. Thank you all so much. A lot of information. I definitely understand a lot this meeting than I did the last one. I do want to thank you. I do think that this meeting did go over a little bit more about what it entails to be part of the committee and the process, and what each meeting will go over. For example, the March one, that's like more of an update, the June one as well. I can grasp the concept a little bit more overall and how it works year round. So thank you.
Yeah, that's the advantage of having two new people in the same meeting. So instead of, I think when you came on as one person and we just went at it, we went.
Yeah, we call it drinking from a fire hose.
Right, exactly. So yes, I reiterate, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much for everything. Your communications are timely as well as digestible, even though it is complex and it's difficult to understand, but I appreciate you putting it into terms that we can digest. I appreciate our new members, and especially the questions that you may feel that you're like, oh my gosh, I should know this. You shouldn't know it. There's no reason for you to know it. And believe me, I appreciate you asking those questions because, you know, I forget them and you will forget them also. And we're going to ask some of those same questions going forward. So never feel that your questions are out of left field because believe me, we're all kind of thinking the same thing. This is difficult stuff to wrap our hands around. And yet alone, remember, we're here for, you know, it's in the title of our group. You know, we're here for the residents, right? And so, you know, they need to be able, if they're interested, they need to understand it too. So I appreciate everyone's time tonight. And unless there's anything else, I think we will, meeting schedule. Has the meeting schedule been set out? I know it's December 13th, because I saw it on my calendar, but is it
It's always the second Wednesday of your March, June, September, and December.
second Wednesday of those quarterlies? Okay, perfect. Excellent.
you.
Well, unless there's anything else, I think we're adjourned. Perfect, thanks.